Hello everyone, hope you all are doing very well. So as of now, you must have heard a lot about ChatGPT. So in this video, I'm going to take the ChatGPT to a test drive to explain how a programmer or the experienced programmer like me can take the advantage of ChatGPT and learn a new language. The content you are going to see is going to help you to learn the language Rust because I have never written a single line of code. So you will see that how ChatGPT is going to help me to learn Rust. However, so you can use the same prompt to learn the other language besides Rust, such as Python or the Java or any other language. That I decided to let's use ChatGPT for something which I never know about it, like the programming Rust. I have been programming last 20 plus years. In last 7 to 8 years, I was mostly working as a lead role, and my programming was about 60 to 40% depending on the different project I worked upon. It means Rust is something very new and never even written a simple hello world for the Rust. So I decided to use the ChatGPT and see that how my programming experience in Python, Java, as well as these initially in C is going to help me to learn Rust by working together with ChatGPT. I have very good experience in programming. I have done a lot of work. It means I understand how to program very well. So taking over a new programming language will be fairly easy compared to someone who has never written code. So think like that way about when I'm trying to use this uh, Rust programming through ChatGPT first. Second, I will be not using any other IDE resource. I'm just going to use the web version of Rust IDE, and I will be using the web version of ChatGPT, where I will be asking questions that a normal programmer is going to ask questions as he or she is trying to learn the programming language for the very first time. So that is our objective. By end of this tutorial, what you are going to learn is that how you can learn a new programming language by the same question. Just change your Rust to Python prompt, and you are still going to learn the Python if that is your objective is. So let's start our journey and using ChatGPT. So the left side, I do have the ChatGPT console, and I'm using the OpenAI web console rather than using any application or the API. And right side, I do have the Rust online IDE. And to support myself, I also have the Python online IDE. It means I can write certain command, certain Python statements over here, and I could test the code. Same thing for the Rust. I could write certain code here, and I can also test it here in the online IDE. And now we are going to start our work. So first, just for the starter, because I'm coming out from the Python background and I have never written any Rust language code. This is the first time I'm really looking into the IDE and trying to understand how Rust programming language is written. So very first thing I want to understand the differences between the Rust and Python. So I would say, what are the differences between Python and Rust? So the differences are coming out through the ChatGPT. So Python is the interpreted language. It means when I'm writing these 3 lines of code, all these 3 lines, 1, 2, and 3 are being interpreted at the given time. If I will make a mistake here, you will see that there is error is being shown in the line number 2 because this sentence is not right. Now once I fix it, it is correct. Versus when I write the similar code like this in the Rust, for example, like this, and I am running this code hello 1, hello 2, hello 3. And if I'm running this code, you will see that code is being compiled. And after compilation, the results are listed here. So this is the interpretation or interpreted language, and here is the compiled language. So that's a first difference. Second is Rust is focused on performance and safety. Underneath, because Rust is more closer to C++ or C performance, that's why the code is compiled, and it also uses the C language memory assessment. So when the code is compiled, it's actually verified that code is really using the memory correctly, and then execution happens. So in summary, Python is better for scripting, data analysis, visualization, while the Rust is more suitable for system level programming, embedded systems, as well as the other performance critical applications. So now we have got an idea that the key differences between Rust and Python. If you would want to use the same the question what we have asked, and if you say what are the top 5, so if you take the same question, what are the top 5 differences between Python and Rust, here you will see that the answer from the ChatGPT came back to us in more the way we have asked. 5, just give me 5 rather than a subjective answer here. So here first syntax, because it's a simple and easy to learn versus the Rust has a more complex syntax. Python simple, Rust complex. Performance, definitely Rust is designed for system programming, so it's more performant, more fast comparative to Python. Memory management, we already know, is designed for system programming. It compiles the code and then try to check for the best memory assignment for all the local global variables as well as the loaded modules. Third, concurrency, there is a built-in support for concurrent programming. Okay, versus the Python, we have to use the third-party libraries to make it handle the concurrent code. And finally, the use cases we have already learned. Okay, now we will look into Rust as a programmer, because we want to learn the Rust as a programming language. So what is first thing we really need to know? First thing what we want to know is that the Rust statement. So what is the Rust statement in code? Okay, so here now we are trying to understand the statements, what statements can be used for the Rust. So if you see here that variable declaration, expression, so this is how you will define a variable as a let. Expressions, you are using the mathematical expression, and then if else. So this is the statements gives us understanding about a programming language. And similar to C, the Rust code is written as a function main. It means that main execute, and if you have multiple sub function or the other method, they all being called from the main. So that's why everything starts from main, versus in Python, as you see, that it's a line by line execution. You can still call the methods, etc., like the any other language, but there is no main. However, there are some other ways where you will learn the directive. If init is main, that's something we are not going to consider here. So here we are seeing is that this is the very first understanding of our Rust related code, and we will replace this code here. We will run this code and then we will understand step by step, because we really want to understand how the Rust code is written. So the code which we have got here based on our very first question, and I'm also creating the side-by-side documentation. So all the work which we are going to do in this exercise will be available as the direct documentation for anybody to try it later without the needs of ChatGPT. So now we need to understand that how we could really learn how to write these different print as well as the variable declaration. So I will go ahead and I will learn how to comment the code. So the question comes next, how to comment the code in Rust, because we do not know whether it's a pound sign, whether it's a 2 slashes, or whether it's a colon. We do not know. So let's learn that. So single line comment start with 2 slashes, and if we would want to comment something, a block, then we need to learn block comment happens like that way. So for example, if we would want to comment something from here to here, some error generated. So let's come back. Question. So we can go ahead, comment from here to here. So this is how we could comment a block. Now we run. So all these 3 lines executed. These are all warning, and the output, as you see here, because we are not printing any output, it means that we need to take this line and we need to put here. It means we will be able to print the results, and print ln means we are going to print the result as a single line. The result is 12. If we will write something after here, print thanks. Let's run the code. Print is expecting a print bang. So I just wanted to show you that the method needs the bang sign here. So when you say print bang, compilation happened and then the result. So there are no particular warnings. So this is the print ln, means writing a statement in a single line, and the print means keep writing without change line. So if I would say right here and I would say thanks again, you will see that thanks again will be written in the same line, and then we have to add the semicolon because I'm coming out for Python experience, so that's why the semicolon is being missed. And right now it's okay, thanks again. So the very last line, the semicolon is not needed because we know there is a last line, and if we put the semicolon here and run, you will see that that is still expected. However, if you will not use semicolon at the end of any other line, that is going to generate an error. So we learned a couple of things, that when we are writing statements in Rust, we need to make sure that semicolon is needed until the very last line. And at the very last line, it's optional. Now we can reload and see how to write comment in Rust. That was our question. And if we would want to comment something, so for example, if we say here let a equals 10 and we want to comment this, we could use that way, and then that line will be comment. So this is our question, how to write comment in Rust. Let's update our document. So that's the first one, that's the second one. And if we would want, we could actually write the 1, 2. So now you are getting an idea that how we are also generating our documentation. And for every 10 question, we will save and we will keep changing the readme file. So you got an idea that how we actually write the comment. And we also learned this part, that how to define the different variables. So let is one way to define. Now you say that x is 5, and what if I say x is 5.5? And let's run here. And as you could see here, that we are trying to define now float and integers, and I try to confuse the system because until I was writing the code let x is 5 and y is 7, there was no problem. It means the default variable was being defined. It means we need to know how to define the integer and float. So let's ask the question, how to define integer and float in Rust. And while it's writing, I'm gonna take this question, copy it. So there is a lot to learn here, but it's very good because that is what our objective is. So if you say 32-bit signed integer, 64-bit unsigned. So 32-bit signed means the number can be negative and positive. When we say unsigned integer, it means it's unsigned and it's taking the full 64-bit signed integer, sorry, unsigned integer. So if we would want to define the float, then we have to say same way, float 32 or the float 64-bit signed, and it's a 32-bit signed integer, and here is a y is 64-bit floating point number. So the error what happened here last time when we say x 5.5, the error was actually happening in the x plus y, because here we were trying to add the result, which we are trying to add float with integer. So we have to define what the result should be. So we have to make sure that we are defining result properly here. So it's by default, Rust is going to select the, if we do not define. So for example, x is the float here and it is a 64-bit floating point number, and y is the 7 is a 32-bit signed integer. So this is the by default we have got the data types here. So let me copy this. So I have copied that question also in our GitHub. Let's come back here. Let's learn. So if you would want to define the integer, so for example, if I would say here let x of, and we would want to say that it's an integer, so I say I32, and we can also say y is also I32, and let's run the code. That's correct. If I would want to say, I need to say this is unsigned 64, so we could say this is unsigned 64 and this is integer 32. If we try to add here result, now we see that we are trying to add the unsigned with signed, and that's why we got an error here. So if I would say let's make the both unsigned 64, and the result is, so result will be the unsigned part of 64. So let me ask this question, that how to get the type of a variable. So how to get the type of a variable in Rust. So standard is the class or the module, mem is the function look like, and the size of is the type. So type ID, any, and type name. Okay. So okay, this is what we wanted to know, that how to get the type. So based on Rust, if you would want to get the type of x, y, and result, so let's take this line and say that what the result type is. So print ln. So we could say the result is the type of here, and then we say type of result here, and let's run. And now as you could see here that whenever we have used std, any, and type name, the error came is that not found in this scope. It means this definition is not found, and as you could see here, we already got the marker that we need to use it. So this is the module we are going to use, the library, standard library, and the type name. Now let's run it. So after we have enabled this method, standard any type name, we are still getting error that it is not found in this scope, and I'm suspecting it is because this language repo is actually older than the Rust compiler which we are using here. The ChatGPT is using the documentation or everything in order to train the model that is until 2021 data. So it may not have the latest Rust related documentation. That's why this code may not be fully applicable. So we can validate one more time by using the other line here. Let's take this line and see if we are able to get that code. So here we are using the standard mem size of, and here we are using the x, and let's see what happens. So the x is 8 byte, it means unsigned 64. So if you see here, so it's an unsigned 64 bit, so you are getting the 8 bytes. So that is the correct answer here. So the standard mem and the size of, wow, this method did work without any problem. However, this code is not working for us. So if we look into the result here, result size of result, so that is also the 8 bytes. So it is correctly defined. However, if we change this to signed, so I32, because that's the I32, and if we change this to I32, the result will become the 4 unsigned integer as it is defined here. So 32 bit signed integer, and the unsigned integer is a 64 bit. Okay. Now, if we would want to test the similar code for the floating point, so we could say, let's use the A, B, and A. We will try to define the floating point first without the definition. So we have 5.3, 7.1, result is A plus B, and we just call it C. And here we use the C, here we use the A, because we wanted to know for the A, and the C is the size of C. And then let's run the code. Here we have few warning, but result is here. So as you could see that here we are writing the result is 12 point. So this is the addition. And if we would want to write here empty, so we could say print ln and just, so this way we will have the separator which really tells, oh, Python mistake. So here we get, so here is the A is 8 byte, because by default is taking the 64 bit floating point number. So that's why it became the 8 bytes here by default. However, if you would want to define it's a floating point, so like a F32, so we can say the A is actually the F32, B is also the F32, and then we try to save this number and see what the C will be here. And C became the 4 byte, because when we define the floating point, 32-bit floating point, so the sum automatically taking the 4 bytes here. So sum is also the F32. And just to get the bottom of this error, I looked into the Stack Overflow just to understand why we are not getting that result. And it looks like because depending on a different version of Rust, we are having that issue. So if we would want to get the type, we could actually use this method, and that will actually give us the type. So I'm just gonna give a quick try. So let's take this function and define here, and then we could say print the type of, and it is actually printing. And then we could say, what if we would want to get the type of, and here we will say, because it's using the print ln, and we want to know what is the type of result here. And let's see if this method works. It works. It means the result is actually I32. Similar to that, if we take this and we say we want to know what is the C here, type, because we know the C is a 4 byte, but we want to know that C is the type of, what type of this variable is. and here we know it's a floating point 32. So for those who are new to programming and suddenly they say, oh, what we have done here. So this is the way you are defining a method in Rust. Then you are calling that method in your main or anywhere you would want to call that method. So you are calling the method. Here you are passing the ampersand result. It means the variable is being passed, which is actually the type of T, which is a template here. And then the result is coming out using the std, any, and the type name. So we can say that this code line is not working because of the dependency of this code is the previous version of the Rust. But at least we know that how we could get the type of a particular variable. So we could see that how to define the variables, whether they are integer or float. But one thing, as you see here, that this is a mutable variable. So the mutable variable here means that variable value could be changed. So let's understand what is going on here. So we have defined x is here 5, and then we are adding. So let me run this code to make sure. So our code is running, everything is okay. Now I will go ahead and I will comment this piece of code also. Let's run. So our output is only this, and here, as you could see here, that x is 5. Now at this point I would say I want to actually change the value of x is 10 here. Let's run the code. As you could see here that we hit an error because here we have defined the value of x is 5, but very quickly I'm changing this value x to 10 and we are getting an error. So you might say, oh, because of that, because we haven't defined the proper type. So let's take the type and define the proper type and run this code. But still there is an error, because whenever you are saying I32, we have to actually use the let here. So now we are saying that I want to change the number, and now the x became the 10. So in this way, I have redefined this value x as a different x here. So I have redefined this way. But that is not what is our objective. We want to change the value, not this way. We want to set the value of x as a 10 here. We do not want to redefine it. So we could define the x as a type mutable. So we could say the x is actually type mutable, and it means that value could change later. And when we run this code, so it means that when we define mutable, we could say this value can be changed. Let's run the code now. Oh, so the warning is that we missed this part, and the addition has been successfully completed. And if we look into the x, what is the type of x? It is still there. So mutable means that we could define a particular variable type mutable, value could be changed, and then this addition can be successful, or whatever mathematical function we would want to try on it. So we have learned the various ways we could define the variables, mutable variables. We can also learn, we learned that how to write the lines, and now we are going to learn how to write a function, like we have already seen here this function. So now we will learn how to write the function. So let's write here how to write a function in Rust and call it. So we need to use the function fn keyword, and then if we would want to pass the parameters, so we have to use this arrow. So here are the ways we are going to call a function in Rust and first. So here is the way where we are going to define and call it. So what I will do, I will go ahead and I will remove this thing. Let me remove this all, and let's comment this method, this section as well. Let me comment this section as well, and let me remove it. We do not really need it. Let's run this code. It is going to print the thanks again because that's all the code we have. And now we are going to learn the function definition. So we need to define a function. So let's call the fn, and our function name is simple. So we just call it function simple. It actually doesn't do anything. Okay. And we say this is our simple function. Let's run it. What happens? No problem. It say the function, there is a warning, it's a dead code. It means it doesn't do anything, which totally makes sense. So let's come back here and write print line bang, and we can say simple function. Let's run it. Now it's dead code. It means that this code is never used. So this simple never used. So we need to learn how to call it. It means that we can call that method wherever we want. So this is the way you see function is defined here, and then we are calling it here. So we will take this simple and we will call it here. And that's the call for the simple, and we need to add the colon. Now run it. So the simple function has been called. It's writing the simple function, and that's it. So we learn how to define a very simple function and then call it. Very good. That's our basic understanding of creating a very simple function. Even if inside we would want to say print ln, and we would say here bang, it means we need to write a semicolon here, and then we would want to add the something here. So we could say we want to actually here we want to say let x is equal 10, let y is equal 20, and let sum x y is equal to x plus y, and here we want to print. So remember how we were printing? This is our method to print. So if we would say we want to print here, I'm just giving you very simple way that it means the value of sum of x and y is going to be printed here, and end of the line and end of the line. Let's run it. So our simple function knows the sum of x and y, and that is what is being printed here. Now if you would want to take this whole thing and make it dynamic, so now we will take this, I will just copy and paste here, and I will remove this part from simple, and I will call it simple add here, and then we will call this simple add here. So now we have two methods, one print and second add. That's okay. Now we can change this to variables. It means we need to pass the variables. So as you could see here that variables are being defined, what are their types. So for example, if we say that our variables are x, comma, y, they are being passed, and these variables are going to be added here, and we are not defining the type here right now, and then we are not defining the return type here, because what happens here, if the return is, we are not returning anything here, we are just adding the sum here, and let's see what happened. Now you see that there is some error. Is really, so first wherever this simple add is called, so we have to define the type, because here you say that there is an error, expected colon at the rate pound and then found the comma. It means we need to define the type. So we could say the x is integer 32 and y is also integer 32. It means these two variables which are being passed type. Okay, now in line 29 is asking that we need to provide the values here, because x and y is defined. We need to provide the value. So I could say this value is 10 and 30. Let's run it. Now the sum is 40. If I will change this value to 300, 310, it means it's very good. But the simple add is actually adding and writing that value inside here. What we need is that we need to return the value from this method, and we need to get that value here. It means we are expecting this print to print here, and this method to actually return the value. It means that this x plus value has to be returned out. So we need to say here x plus y, the way it is defined here. So now let's see what happens if we define here. So we are passing the value. We are expecting that some xy is going to store the return of this, and then it's going to print here. Let's see where the errors are. So the line number 21. So it says that we need to use the pretty print instead, and this is an error. So let's try to use this way. The sum is like this, okay, and space. Now run it if that is the issue. So the problem I'm expecting is that because the x plus y, so it means that let me return it here and then see what happened. Return, okay, if we do return here, does it expected the type? So now you see here we need to provide the type. So if this is the integer, this is the integer, so we need to provide the type. So type is going to be this, and result will be the integer 32-bit. Now if we run, oh, single line, and the sum is 310. It means when we were trying to write this thing, it has nothing to do with the error which we are expecting in the warning. Actually, we need to provide the return, because if we are not providing the return here, it's expecting the signed integer 32-bit type return, and that's why when we say it's going to return this of the type, the value was stored here and then it printed here. If we would want to know that the value of some xy, we already know how to get that value. We have checked earlier. We can actually look this. We say the sum, and then we need to enable this method. If we run this code, it actually says this is the I32. So this is how you will be able to define your method. Now, if we go a little more deeper, you could say that we can actually define a particular value. So for example, the default y value is something different. So we could say the default of y is 100, for example. It means if we run this code, as you could see here, so here it say we can define the default here. So I have defined the default here, and we are getting an error. Let's see what happens. The error is the line number 10, missing colon, x is 32, I32. Then here it say that an argument is missing. Let me close this, run it. I expect no error. Okay, so let me try equals 100. So when we define a default parameter, we are getting the error. So let's me save this code. First, how to write the function in Rust and call it. So at least we could not get this code working, which we will make sure that we complete that in the next part. And let me take this whole code and add that here too. The code which we have covered in this exercise. So the code which we have covered in this exercise, this whole code, I have also added that here for us to review. So this is our documentation about what we have learned today by just experimenting the Rust programming language using ChatGPT. But as I mentioned, that we still need to take help from Google or the Stack Overflow to clarify a few things. So now we want to know how to get the version of Rust compiler within the program. So how to get the Rust compiler version from Rust code, because we want to know what particular version of Rust compiler is running in this IDE. Perfect. So this is the line. Let's use this. Let me run. Say this error originates in the macro env nightly builds run with -g micro backtrace for more info. But looks like that the access to this env macro may not be available to this IDE, because my objective is that very first chapter just using the online IDEs to understand the problems related with that. Then I will be using the Rust compiler with an IDE on local file system to make it work. So you can understand the differences between using any IDE versus a particular version of Rust compiler running in your local file system in your own machine. So we could not get this line working. Let's comment it. Now let me use this method here, and it's going to ask us to use this method. So let's use that, run it. So line 27, where we were trying to print string trim. So the output, so we are trying to write the output. Just see let binding to create a longer lived value. So let binding. So just see dash version. So we are trying to process a command and store in the output, and if it failed, then write the failed to execute. So this is the way we are calling a command method, which is here, and then by passing the Rust C a dash version. So this is the output. Let's see 27. So it means let binding and then binding in terms. So there is a suggestion. So we can use this and we can comment this line. So binding is equal to string type this output here, and then next this line, and then Rust C version is going to be called here. Let's see. So the compiler we are using right now is the 1.66.1, which is the 10th January 2023. It is kind of very latest build. And if you would want to know what is the latest version of the Rust, so 1.66.1 is the latest version we have for the Rust, and that is what we are getting, 1.66.1 in the compiler which is available in this IDE. So at least we know that how to get the version of the Rust compiler, and this is the code which helped us to get the version. So if we would want to take this whole method and convert this into how to get the version, so you could say here function get Rust version, and it's an empty function, for example, and take this whole code all the way here, write it here. We can say do not use the code below. That was the error prone code, and this gives us the Rust compiler version, and here we can call the get Rust version, run, and that's the code here. So you learn how to write the method as well as the calling. And here is something, those who are new to programming, basically here we are calling a command, which is a built-in method available in the standard library. And we are calling the rustc command, which is actually passing this particular argument, and then this return is being stored into the output. And if there is an error, then it's going to say that failed to execute this particular process. Store this command execution, store the result into the output, here output, and then we collect the standard output, which is the console output. So think like when this command is ran on a console window, and then that is the method which actually convert this output to the string, and then we trim it by cleaning up anything, and then finally we get that value out of here. So this is another method we wanted to add. So let me add this also. So there is another option we can see here, is that using the std version and version meta, and if we are using the Rust version 1.40 and above, so we have already validated that we are using 1.66.1. so we could actually use this line here and see if we are getting that value out. So we need to use the standard version meta. So let's run this code. Could not find version in standard. So it knows that it's using the standard, but it cannot find the version. So as you could see that we could not call this standard version. So the question comes that how to find the methods available in a module. So if I ask how to list all methods from a Rust module in Rust code. So what I want to know that the error say that version is not available. So a standard module does not have version. So if you would want to know that this standard which is available in Rust version 1.66 is right or not, yeah, sorry, so I think that may not be able to work. In that case, we really need to use the command line expression to load a particular module and then get the methods built into it. So for the Rust version 1.66.1, here is the standard module, and in the standard, if we look into the version, let me search for version. So there is only one version and conversion. So it means that version is no longer available in the version 1.66. That's the reason this code may not be applicable for that. So we can actually come to our documentation and we could say as version method is no longer available. And now we can go ahead and we can actually remove this code because that is not needed. Now our code works, and we can take this whole code, that's the source code we had, update the source code with the updated code. It has the get Rust version too. Okay, and so that's where I would say that this is our chapter number 1, where we just wanted to understand how to use the ChatGPT to learn the Rust when I have never written a single line of code. So we have asked about 6 questions from the ChatGPT, and we got a lot of content coming out of it in a very nice, very descriptive way with few code samples, and those code samples helps us to learn the language Rust by using an IDE. So far, I would say it's a very impressive way to learn because I didn't use Google, but my focus was all on ChatGPT to help me learn the language. Now in the other chapters, I'm going to go a little more deeper and write some more complex code and understand how ChatGPT is going to help. That's all for now. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in my next video. Until then, thank you so much.